Hey there flippers, and welcome back to Second Life Treasures. So on today's video we're going to be doing something a bit different, and I wanted to have a bit of a discussion about how some of eBay's policies are really affecting sellers. Now, one of the biggest sort of comments slash complaints that I get from everyone that I meet at the boot fairs, people that I talk to online, is that eBay has a bias, or bias, however you say it, in favour of buyers. And to a certain point I can agree with that. I've seen it myself, and yeah, I will agree with that. In some of eBay's policies and procedures, it definitely feels like it's weighed in favour of the buyers. So what I wanted to do today was to have a bit of a look at look at one policy in particular, and see how that affects buyers. But before we get into the video, just wanted to say, if you do enjoy the video, don't forget to hit that like button and also share it about a bit, so that we can really get the conversation going on this one. So what bit am I actually talking about today? Well, it's going to be the feedback system. And yeah, I have long thought that the feedback system has major flaws in the way that it operates, and the biggest one is the fact that there is no transparency really. So if you're a buyer on the platform, you can do all types of feedback. You can list positive, negative, neutral, or just not leave feedback at all. Whereas if you're a seller, the only feedback that you can leave is positive feedback. And then if there's any other issues, you can report the buyer, which we'll go into a bit more later on. But yeah, for me, that makes the feedback system completely flawed and not suitable for what it's needed to be. I was speaking with a customer service rep and said that, or he basically said to me that this approach was done to stop tit for tat feedback. Like, you leave me negative feedback, I'll leave you negative feedback. And I think that there's a much better way to deal with this, and I'll go into it a bit more later on in the video. But what I wanted to say is, obviously, don't get me wrong, I will say right now that there are terrible people on both sides of this argument, both buyers and sellers. So I'm not going out to attack either side, and I'm not going out to defend either one. I just want this to basically be a sort of talking point more than anything. Now, the problems come when you have buyers and sellers. So the buyers now know that sellers are fearful of negative feedback, and sometimes you will get buyers that will use that to, I don't know whether exploit is the right word, but that's what I've got in my script. And yeah, the buyers know that there's no comeback on them. So what I want to do is I want to split this into a couple of different parts. So first off, we're going to look at the problems, and then I'm going to look at some potential solutions. So I don't want this to be a rant video where we say how bad eBay is. I want this to actually be a positive starting point for a conversation. So the first point that I want to talk about is actually that the feedback system isn't a true representation for the eBay community. Now, the reason I think the current feedback system is not a true representation is, as I said earlier on, it's people's ability to leave feedback. You can have a feedback system, but if it's one-sided, it pretty much makes it useless. And also, I think that there's a fundamental misunderstanding with the feedback system. Sort of some buyers will misunderstand how the feedback system works, or what the feedback system is for, but there obviously are people out there that will misuse the feedback system as well. So when I look at buyers, I see that there are two different types of buyers. You've got the ones that have been on the site for a while and have an established feedback score, and then you've got the new accounts that have recently been created. They've got 0 feedback score, and with those ones I'm always apprehensive. And the reason I'm apprehensive is because I've looked back at my the negative feedback that I've got on my account, and all of that negative feedback came from new buyers. And what I've found is that if you've got a user that's been on the platform for a while, they are more likely to reach out to you to try and resolve the issue. So to give you an example, I had a buyer reach out to me, I think it was last week, and they bought a PS2 game off me, and when they got it, the case was broke, and I apologised profusely, explained my process and how it was all packaged, and obviously the case wasn't sent like that, it was obviously damaged in the post. The buyer didn't want anything for it, they just literally wanted to let me know. And that was a buyer that had a good amount of feedback. But what that then results in is that the buyers that communicate with you, they'll end up more likely that they'll leave positive feedback after you've communicated with them, whether you've solved the problem or that you've just responded to them. And sometimes obviously they won't leave feedback at all, which once again to me is also fine. I'd rather you leave no feedback than negative feedback. But another example is that there's a few times where I've had buyers, there's a few times that I bought things myself, and when they've arrived I've not really been too happy with the condition. Now that would be, what was it? Yeah, I bought a special edition Nintendo DS, and I knew that it wasn't working, but when it arrived it was so much worse than the person had put in the description, and it was a difficult one because I couldn't go back to them and say, well, you didn't explain this, you didn't explain that, because they would have just turned around and said, well, I didn't know about it. So there wasn't really anything I could do about it, but I didn't really want to get into the hassle of leaving them negative feedback just for them not putting the information in the listing. But I will also say that if I get a seller that is particularly bad, I will leave negative feedback. And that's more to sort of highlight to the community that this is a seller to be aware of. And I think actually through all my times on eBay, I can only actually remember that happening twice. And actually that's happened probably in the 2 times were in the last year. So yeah, I don't do it too often. But getting back on topic, I will say 99% of the time everything goes well. Buyers and sellers are very happy and there's positive feedback all round. But in those 1% of the cases, I'd probably say out of that 1%, 90% of those can literally just be sorted by a message or some communication between the buyers and the sellers. But it's that 0.1% that we're going to be talking about here. And this is where the buyer is intent on, once again, I've got attacking down on my script, but I don't think that's the right word. Yeah, basically, there's nothing you could do as a seller that is going to change that person's mind from leaving you negative feedback. Once again, I'm going to use a real world example for this, and this is actually something that I've been dealing with over the last week. So a buyer bought another video game from me, and as soon as they received the item, they immediately opened a return. Now what they've done was they added a photo of the disc, and basically this disc looked like it'd been skipped across the floor and was in an absolute terrible state. Now I responded to them with a copy of the close-up picture that I put in the listing. So whenever I do a CD based item, I will always do a close-up copy of all discs that are involved, just so people can see the condition before they buy. And it also helps in situations like this. Not so much this time, but we'll go through that another time. So what I've done was I created an image with the original picture from the listing and then a picture of the disc that he sent. And I'll pop that up now just so you can see an example of it. And basically he just refused to admit that he'd done anything. So long story short, I had to accept the return. And I'm going to go into returns in a bit more detail in another video. But as soon as he opened the return, I knew exactly what was going to happen. That as soon as his refund was processed, he was going to leave me a negative feedback. Which, surprise, surprise, did happen. I was quite lucky with this, but because he ended up opening a case against me, because as a top rated seller you don't have to offer a full refund in these situations. He then opened a case to get the remainder, and basically eBay stepped in, they issued him the remainder, didn't take it off me, and then closed the case. But obviously when they closed the case they removed his negative feedback, so I don't think he knew that that was going to happen. So yeah, I didn't get any negative feedback for that one. So in this instance, I would have felt that it was appropriate to have been able to leave feedback as a seller. Obviously this person, once again, it was a brand new account, they had zero feedback, and yeah, for me, I think that I should have been able to inform the community that I've had a problem with this transaction. This was my version of events. Obviously the buyer could relay his version of events, and yeah, so I wasn't able to do that. The next point I want to go into is how eBay says feedback isn't important, and always, but on the sort of flip side of that, they're always pushing buyers and sellers to leave feedback. Now, this is an oxymoron that I always see with eBay, and it makes me laugh. So when you speak to eBay about any feedback in any way, they always say that as a seller, feedback's not important, and it's your seller rating that really affects your account. And to a certain point, that's true, if you're looking at it from the perspective of the algorithm. But eBay will always send out messages. So I get countless emails from eBay, both as a buyer and a seller, to leave feedback on my items. Don't forget to leave feedback on your items. And yeah, they're always pushing for people to leave feedback. That then leads us to when you bring buyers into the mix. So I'm, as well as being a seller on eBay, I'm also a massive buyer. You can see obviously we've got a big portion of my video game collection here, and I buy a lot of video games off eBay. And one of the big features that I use is the saved searches and email alert features. And I'll put a picture up of one of the saved search emails that I got today. And what you'll see is that immediately the first item that pops up, it's promoting that this seller has got 100% feedback. I think I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think there's about 3 or 4 listings just in this one email where they're promoting this seller has 100% feedback. Then if we click into the listing, you'll then see that where the seller information is, they're also promoting that this seller has 100% feedback. So yeah, you're correct. Feedback doesn't affect your position in search, but it will affect how buyers view your items. You'll get some buyers that will think that if a seller doesn't have 100% feedback, that they're dishonest or that they should be avoided, and I really don't think that's the case. But that then moves me on to the third and final point, which is going to be a complete contradiction, is how negative feedback is in fact meaningless, or how most negative feedback is meaningless. So after what I said in the last point, how can I now turn around and say that negative feedback is meaningless? Well, let's look at our personal buying history. So think about the last 5 items that you bought on eBay. How many of those items did you actually look at the seller's feedback? How many of those items can you even remember looking at the seller's feedback? I'll assume you're all probably like me, and you'll notice if a seller's rating, seller's feedback is low. So I think with me, anything below sort of 98%, I tend to notice. But other than that, you don't really notice. I would say in the last year, it's probably been, I think I can only remember one time where I didn't buy off someone because of their feedback score. And I think for that one, their feedback score was around sort of 84%. So there'd been a lot of issues with this seller, and that's why I avoid it. But yeah, that's why I think a bit of odd negative feedback here and there doesn't really affect your store within eBay. And I'm currently running, I think I've got 2 pieces of negative feedback for the year. I'm running at 99.6% positive feedback. and yeah, I don't really see an impact. But as I said earlier, this isn't going to be a let's attack eBay and say how bad everything they're doing is video. I want to point out some meaningful suggestions to the community that could help make eBay better. Don't get me wrong, I know for sure eBay will never see this video and they've got no interest in what I've got to say. But I do want to get it out there just so that potentially it could start the conversation. So how would I change the feedback system? Well, first off, I want to make it a fairer representation of the community. So first off, I would even out the feedback system. And what do I mean by that? I think that both sellers and buyers should be able to leave all types of feedback. But the caveat to that is that sellers should generate, or all users, sorry, I'm going to say users at this point, all users should gain a level of trust before they're able to leave negative feedback. So as I said earlier on, one of the biggest things that I saw with my feedback is that it is new accounts. So accounts that have literally been set up within sort of 24 hours of making a purchase. They're the ones more likely to leave negative feedback. So the way that I would approach it is if sellers are below this certain threshold. So let's say they've got, chuck out an arbitrary number, you've got to have 10 successful transactions in order to be eligible to leave neutral and negative feedback. And that's as both buyers and sellers. So if you're below that threshold, you would basically have the same rights as a current seller. So you'd be able to leave positive feedback and you'd be able to report to eBay, but you wouldn't be able to leave negative feedback. So for this, I'm going to use an example. So we've got two users. We've got John, who has been a seller on eBay for 5 years. He's a top rated seller with a feedback score just like mine of 99.6%. Then we've got Sam. Sam is a new buyer on the eBay platform. He set up his account 24 hours ago and has a feedback score of 0. So John lists an item on eBay. Let's say, there we go, this copy of Superman on the N64. So Sam comes along, he buys the game. John packages it up really nicely. He normally does it really well, makes sure the game's fully protected, and then sends it out tracked, so everything's above board, and John's got the confidence to know that he's not going to get an item not received. A few days later, the game gets delivered to Sam. He opens up the box and realises actually it wasn't Superman on the N64 I wanted, it was Superman on the PlayStation that I wanted. So he looks at the listing again, goes back and then notices that actually the listing did state it was for the N64. So Sam realises it's completely his fault, the game is not the correct one. So he decides he wants to return the game. But wait a minute, why should Sam have to pay for a return? That's not the way things are done nowadays. So John offers returns on all of his listings, but he states that the buyer has to pay return postage. Now, obviously with the return postage, that is only if the buyer is making the choice to return it. If, for example, the seller has not been truthful on the listing, or the item's not described, or anything that the seller has not communicated, then that's when things change. The seller is then completely responsible. So Sam then makes the decision that no, John needs to pay for this return postage and give me my full refund. So he opens up a return saying that the item is not as described and that it was a different platform. So John is forced to accept the return. Sam is then issued a return label. He sends the item back, and John has the money taken out of his eBay funds. The item's then returned, and John issues the refund as he is essentially forced to do. Now, with the current system, if Sam was feeling malicious, he could actually go and leave John negative feedback. And all John can do is report Sam to eBay, and basically say that he's misused the the return system. Now, just getting off topic a bit, with regards to the reporting system, this is purely going on my own observations and opinions. But with regards to reporting buyers, I have never ever heard of a buyer being banned from the site following on from a seller's report. So it has sort of generated this assumption more than anything else that buyers can essentially do what they want. There's going to be no repercussions for them because at the moment you can't leave negative feedback for them. You report them and nothing really gets done. And yeah, that's just how it goes. So with the new system that I'm looking at, or the new system that I'm suggesting, so to speak, Sam would only be able to leave positive feedback, saying how amazingly easy John made things, and even though there was a problem with the return, he returned it and he was an amazing seller. But on the other hand, John would have the ability, because he is an established eBay seller. He's had the 10 successful transactions that we originally set out. He would then be able to leave negative feedback for Sam, saying that he misused the returns process to avoid paying the return postage. So in turn, that would lead Sam to have a feedback score of -1. And I know, me personally, as a seller, if I saw a buyer had a feedback score of -1, I would go above and beyond to make sure that everything was documented. I would video me packaging the item up. I would do a video all around the item showing every little problem with it. I would do photos. I would do everything I needed to, and then send them to the buyer before dispatching to say, this is the item that you're going to be receiving. And yeah, so there would be no way that they could argue it. But a lot of the time, even that doesn't matter, because with eBay's appeals process, which once again we'll go into that in another video, yeah, it can be a bit of a joke sometimes. But we're not just here to pick on buyers, because as I said earlier on, there are some unscrupulous sellers out there as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to switch things round. So John is now a brand new seller with 0 feedback, and Sam has been on the site for 5 years, and now he's got 100% feedback. That is the quickest way to generate feedback I've ever seen. You go from 0 to 100 in 5 minutes. So what John has done is he's gone on and he has listed this Wii U tablet, and he said on the listing that it is fully working. There's pictures of the tablet working and everything. Sam comes along, buys the tablet because he absolutely loves the Wii U, and why wouldn't he? So when the tablet arrives, Sam is shocked, to say the least. So the tablet has been sent in just a normal poly mailer. There's no padding, there's no nothing. The mailer is absolutely shredded. There's holes all over it, and yeah, it's in a terrible state. And when he pulls the tablet out, the shell of the tablet is completely scratched, it's cracked, it's dented, the screen is smashed, and yeah, Sam's now in a awful situation, because no seller, or most sellers want to make sure that that person gets the item that they want in exactly the condition they want. So what Sam does is he messages John, says that this is how the tablet showed up, sort of he wants his money back. John doesn't bother to respond. So what what John does is he doesn't respond. But in addition to that, he also blocks Sam. So Sam's got no way to actually communicate with him. So in that instance, the only thing Sam can do is open up a return. Once again, John doesn't respond to any of that. And luckily, because eBay have got some protections, or because the sellers have got, the buyers, sorry, have got the protections, eBay then steps in, takes the money off John, refunds it back to Sam, and then yeah, Sam is totally protected and doesn't lose out. Now, in this instance, things would work out just as they do now. So Sam could go on, he could leave negative feedback for John, and yeah, it just moves on as it does now. John could only leave positive feedback. And then the last example we're going to look at is if both buyer and seller were brand new to the site. So both John and Sam have got brand new accounts. They've both got zero feedback. And let's assume it's the same example as we've just used. We've got the Wii U tablet that's come, it's damaged. Because both seller and buyer are new to the platform, neither of them are going to be able to leave negative feedback for the other. The party at fault here is clearly John, and the seller would receive punishment in the form of a ding to his seller rating, which would, especially being a new seller, would massively affect his ability to sell on eBay. So yeah, even though he wouldn't be able to, Sam wouldn't be able to publicise the negative feedback, it would be a more fairer system, because it then means that it's a difficult one, because it kind of punishes the new honest sellers, the new honest buyers, sorry, but it also protects the established sellers from the new dishonest buyers. So that's my way that I would suggest to maybe make the feedback system on eBay more fair. But the other area that I think the feedback system could really do with improving is all around the misunderstanding of the feedback system. So we'll go back to another real world example of here. One of the bits of negative feedback that I've got on my account is for a brand new HP ink cartridge, and the buyer's feedback was the ink didn't last very long. I was a bit disappointed, to be honest, that I'd not made the cartridge to better standards, and yeah, it would have lasted longer for the buyer. That's right, my name's Second Life Treasures, not HP. But all joking aside, to me this is an example of someone that was new to eBay. Once again, they had zero feedback, didn't understand what the feedback system was for, and it's to communicate your experience with the seller. This, I would have said, would have more been a product review, which I believe you can do, which is a separate thing on eBay. The way that I would get around this is fairly straightforward. When you are on the feedback screen, when you're adding feedback for your purchase, there'll be a little drop down, and this would only be for buyers, and it gives you 3 options within there. So you can basically give feedback on the seller, the item, and even eBay, because there are times where eBay causes problems. That way, the feedback on an item, if the feedback is on an item or eBay, and sort of how they conducted themselves, the seller would not be impacted by this. But people would still see that it's a feedback that's come on the transaction, so they would still see it, but it wouldn't affect the seller's ratings. And that's all I had with regards to the feedback system. Yeah, it's a very interesting topic, and it's one actually I spent a long time writing this script, just really getting my thoughts down on it. But what I want to do is, before we wrap up, I just want to leave you with a comment that the eBay rep that I was speaking to made on the call that I thought was so true, and it could really help other people realise that negative feedback isn't that much of a big deal. And what he said was, all successful sellers on the platform have negative feedback. And this could not be more true. As a seller, you have to remember you're not going to be able to please everyone out there, and there will always be people out there that are just looking to get something for nothing. So yeah, that is going to wrap up this video. Let me know in the comments down below what you think about this. Do you think that there are better ways that eBay can deal with feedback? Do you think that the current feedback system is perfect as it is? Yeah, I would be really interested to know what people think about this. I think it's definitely a topic of discussion that could be worth investigating more, shall we say. But with that said, I am going to wrap the video up there. But before you head off, if you did enjoy the video, don't forget to hit that like button. And if you feel that it is going to be useful to people, if you think it will be useful to someone else, maybe share the video with them as well. And also, if you're not already, smash that subscribe button and ring the bell to be kept up to date when I upload new videos. And yeah, with that said, thank you so much for watching today. Really hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you on the next one. All right, bye.